Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
You're going to be so inspired by Travis Sweet and his story, his cystic fibrosis story. His daughter is Piper, and how his story started and has since unfolded, it will honestly maybe shock you even a little bit. It's almost unbelievable. Travis learned that his daughter Piper had CF when she was 4 years old, and he was supported by a great community and what he now calls his Army of Angels, as he went to his community and he soon started the Crossing for Cystic Fibrosis. This supports a paddle from the Bahamas to Florida. And this is just the beginning of the journey for Travis, because not only does he learn that his sister LeeAnn has CF, he learns that first. She was diagnosed at 40 years old. Then he discovers that his daughter Piper has CF. And then he learns that he also has CF, and there's more to tell on that story too. The Piper's Angels Foundation supports the CF community through the Urgent Financial Assistance Program and other programs. This program supports people who are in need of medically necessary and time-sensitive financial assistance, and many other programs that you will find in our show notes. And Piper's Angels has a famous advisory board member too, and that is Jimmy Buffett. So it's a very exciting foundation. They're doing great things, and you will be so thrilled to meet Travis Sweet. So it is time to literally dive in and talk with Travis. All right. So Travis, welcome. So glad to talk to you on this podcast, because your enormous and wonderful event is coming up, and it's very important to the CF community. And for the first time, I'm really excited to be flying out to do a very small part and volunteer. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Laura. And we are super excited for you to come down and be a part of it and be at the beach landing. It's coming up quick.
It is coming up really quick, and we are going to get to all of that wonderful information. But first, tell us how your daughter Piper is doing, how her health is, how old she is, and how things are going for her.
Piper's doing really well. Thank you for asking. She's 15 years old now, so she's wrapping up her freshman year in high school. And health-wise, she's been great. She's on, the more recent modulator therapy. And so a lot of the lung infections and sinus infections that she was having all the time have cleared up. And she's cheerleading. So athletically, she's very healthy. And she's just got a great personality. And I'm really proud of her for where she's at, her maturity. And this is the first year that she's paddling in the crossing on a relay team.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. That's exciting. And I don't know. I think when I became aware of you, maybe she was 8. Is that possible? I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, probably. I mean, she was diagnosed at 4. And we did the first crossing in 2013, but it was much smaller. And we were fundraising for the National Foundation at the time, and it was called Crossing for a Cure. Once Piper had gone through several health challenges and long-term hospitalizations, and it became more clear to me that there was a bigger need for the families, that's when we decided to create Piper's Angels Foundation, and we relaunched the crossing in 2017. So I think that's when a lot of people became more aware of Piper and her story and our story together.
And I have heard about how your family diagnosis went, but until I was prepping and got some exact dates from you, I didn't realize that your sister, LeeAnn, was diagnosed before Piper. So kind of chronologically take us through how the diagnosis for cystic fibrosis went in your family.
Yeah, it was really strange. It was such an interesting, shift as a family. LeeAnn had been sick really her whole life. she had been to dozens of doctors, the Mayo Clinic. She had had half a lung removed before she was diagnosed with CF. And it wasn't until she was at Shands in Gainesville when they ultimately did a genetic panel, and they were aware of the one CF gene, but they found the other gene. So that was November of 2010. And I remember hearing it through the grapevine of the family, like that she had been diagnosed with something, but my life was full of a lot of activity with Piper, with a lot going on. And it just didn't register. I didn't get the clarity, and I really wasn't digging into it too much to realize like, oh, wait, this is something genetic, right? And LeeAnn was actually the first person that said something to me about, hey, I know Piper's been sick a lot. Maybe this is related. And I remember when she said that, like this voice in my head being almost angry about that, like that she even suggested it. It kind of made me mad, like, like kind of like, how dare you try to make this correlation, like that Piper would have this, like this is obviously not related to whatever you have had. Of course, that was my ego, but
or even fear, right?
It was fear. It was everything, right? It was like, it was denial, really. It was like Piper had been sick from the time she was an infant. We didn't know what was wrong. It was in the back of my mind. It was that kind of, thinking, feeling. And so exactly 1 year later, after Piper had developed pneumonia, she was diagnosed in November of 2011. When all of that kind of came to light, that's when our family really sat back and went, oh man, this is big. This is something we didn't realize even existed. And now 2 people in our family and in different ways are being affected. And it was really heartbreaking and overwhelming at that time for the family to kind of, and I think for even my parents to accept, right, that this was something that they passed down. And then my sister Nikki got pregnant that year, and exactly, ironically enough, 1 year later, in November of 2012, Nikki was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and they found her other nonsense mutation. So that was really how it all started to unfold.
I think this is going to sound judgy, but I'm not judging. But why then didn't you get tested? Or like me, do you think I'm the parent? I couldn't have it. I passed it down. I must be a carrier. Like, is that what you're kind of thinking?
That's a great question. When Nikki was diagnosed, it really kind of was even more shocking to me because she wasn't sick. So like it made sense that LeeAnn was diagnosed. It made sense that Piper was diagnosed. And then when Nikki was diagnosed, it was like, wait, that means there's a possibility that I could have the same 2 genes. But I've been fairly healthy my whole life. But I was and have always had a little tiny bit of mucus production, and I've had some digestion issues, but it wasn't a priority for me. I didn't know a lot about CF at that time. I was learning a lot. And, one of the concerns I had over time was like, what does that mean? Like on paper, if I'm diagnosed with CF, does this mean that I'm not going to be able to be around Piper? We're going to have to be extra careful. Like, what does all that mean? And so I kind of just ignored it and said, you know what? I've got Piper to focus on. We've got a lot of challenges in front of us. And I see a lot of great opportunity to serve and to help these families. So it just wasn't a priority for me. And over time, as I learned more about CF and I understood that it's important for every person with CF to have a voice. And even if that means you have an atypical version of CF, it's still important to address it as what it is. And so kind of it ate away at me over time. And I finally got to a point where I said, you know what? I know what Nikki has. I know the 2 genes. So if I go get a genetic panel done at Shands, go through the process. I know it's going to be a process, but at least I can get it done and see, hey, do I have that other CF gene or not? And, my suspicion was correct. I did. And so that's when I was diagnosed, and that was November of 2021.
And that's just incredible. And, I didn't get tested to find out what gene I carried until this year. So, I mean, same thing. I wouldn't think I had CF and I don't, but I'm just saying until there was kind of a need to know our mutations, for the health of the girls and for modulators, there really wasn't any reason kind of to find out what gene you had. It just didn't matter before all these drugs came out. But wow, I mean, that must have knocked you off your feet, or were you prepared for it?
I was prepared for it. I mean, I could see the writing on the wall, and I mean, CF hasn't affected me personally at my health that dramatically. I was hospitalized once for some gastrointestinal pain, but it's never been a major issue. I've only had a couple sinus or lung infections over the years, and maybe they were a little worse than for a normal person, but I'm really healthy and I'm really fortunate. And I feel such a deep sense of gratitude because the more I've seen in the CF community over the years, the more I realize, like for Nikki and I, how fortunate we are because we have two CF genes. But, I was born in 1984. If I would have had two copies of Delta 508, I probably wouldn't be here, or I'd be getting a lung transplant at this point in my life, So it just kind of blows my mind. And it makes me wonder and think about probably the thousands of people who have CF and don't realize it because they have light symptoms or moderate symptoms and they just don't know and they're not aware. It just really makes me feel so fortunate and grateful. And at the same time, just being in the position of seeing people go through so much pain and suffering, it definitely has deepened my compassion on many levels. And, I do go to Shands for my CF clinic checkups, so kind of go through that process, and just kind of ironic having been through that so much with Piper and then going through it myself is kind of strange.
Mm-hmm. And are there just the three of you as far as your siblings go? Is it just you, Nikki, and LeeAnn?
We have a older brother, Jeff, who is from my dad's first marriage. So it's the same marriage that LeeAnn was born from, and he does not have CF.
Wow. And so how do your parents feel? And it is so common that siblings have CF. I didn't know that when both my girls were diagnosed with CF, how very common it was. I remember thinking, because we diagnosed Molly and then we decided we were going to have one more child. And it's a long story I've told many times, but we thought, how could we possibly have a second child with CF? That won't happen. Even knowing there's a 1 in 4 chance with each pregnancy, we were just very naive then. And so we have 2 girls with CF. But since then, I have just learned it is so, so common.
Yeah, I've met many families who have more than one child in the family, with CF. And my parents, I think they've really come around and come a long way. I think we all have in the acceptance, the understanding, and also embracing what it is that is unique to our family and all of us, and seeing how fortunate we are to be alive at this time with cystic fibrosis, that, if there was ever a time to be alive with CF, now's the time. Not that you'd want to wish that on anybody, but at the same time, it's brought our family together in such a beautiful way. And it's taught us so much about cherishing the most precious aspects of life. And it's hard not to be grateful for, everything that CF has brought into our life. And I think my parents are really proud of Piper and LeeAnn and Nikki and myself and the work that we're doing through Piper's Angels and the Crossing and helping other families with CF.
It is wonderful, and it's a great way to transition. And your parents must be so proud of what you are doing and how it has grown. Talk about your foundation, when you decided to get that going, and then the Crossing, how that all came about.
Yeah, well, when Piper was diagnosed, 2 weeks later at her first clinic appointment, we were told about this connection to the ocean and how salt water and the aerosol salt, breathing it into the lungs, could be such a powerful healing modality for her. And we lived in Florida. So, for me, it was such a gift to hear that because, at that time, it was right after her diagnosis. And it was really heavy at that time, a lot of concerns. And so to hear that, it was just amazing. It was a miracle. And I started taking her out paddleboarding with me. I put her on the front of the board and go paddle around. And I wasn't a paddler at the time. I wasn't a surfer, but I realized, oh my gosh, I've got to keep this little girl in and around salt water as much as possible, because even if it prevents one lung infection per year, that would be huge at this point. So that was how it got started. And I kind of fell in love with paddling. It got me out into an environment that I'd never really spent much time in, aside from being on a boat here and there fishing with my dad. But I was out there, and, when you're paddling, it's inherently slow and safe and quiet. You see a lot of turtles and manatees, stingrays, and Piper was there with me. And those are some of the greatest memories I have of her as a little girl. She was telling stories of, mermaids and fairy tales, and she'd pick up a stick and help me paddle. And it was just such a cool time in our life. And to deepen in the gratitude at that time, that here we were having these experiences. And that was kind of the first, I would say, wave of gratitude that came over me of like, wait a second, well, I'm feeling so good about this, but this is because Piper has CF. That's why we're out here, and it was such an interesting, spectrum to be on. And around that time, I saw some paddleboarders out in Hawaii doing long distance crossings between the islands. And I thought, that's super cool. And the National Foundation had nominated me for their Fort Lauderdale's Finest event. And they said, well, you've been nominated. Now you got to come up with a fundraiser. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, sure. And I started thinking about, well, what could be done? I thought, well, it's possible. I knew the Gulf Stream went north, and I thought it's possible that you could paddle from the Bahamas to Florida. Not sure exactly how that would work. And it took a while to kind of get it going and the logistics and everything behind it. But that was really how the crossing was born. And we did it that first year in 2013. And I never really thought that we would do it again, or I would do it again. It was really difficult. We got rough weather. It worked. It created awareness. We got some media publications. We raised a little bit of money, but I was like, wow, okay. For me personally, it was more about showing Piper, doing something big and showing Piper like, hey, you don't have to let this disease define you. We can define our lives with it. Let's make the most out of it. And that's what it was really about. And the one thing I experienced during that time that really changed me was feeling this overwhelming sense of community. I never felt that in my life. I never felt so much unconditional love, people showing up in various ways just to be there, people I didn't know, people that didn't know my family, right? And it was such a powerful experience that I think that really was a big imprint on me, on my heart, my soul, my mind, everything. And, fast forward, after Piper from 4 to 8, she did get very sick. I mean, she was in and out of the hospital for weeks, sometimes months at a time. She got a long-term feeding tube for 2 years. She had a long-term IV port put in. And watching her go through that and all of those nights in the hospital and, balancing work schedules and trying to make it, and then meeting other people in the CF community along the way. And then understanding that for the last 70 years, almost all of the fundraising has gone to research for a cure, and seeing like, okay, wow, these people are living longer, but what's the cost of buying more time? Because I was seeing people who were in their 20s really struggling. I mean, and physical complications and, just all this stuff that was coming up. And it was like, well, man, if you really are going to help somebody live longer, you've got to try to help them live stronger. And that's when it just became too overwhelming of a sense of an accountability that we've got to do something more. I can't stand by and watch this happen and watch these families struggle, knowing what we're going through. And we have a pretty strong family, right? But to see people really hurting and struggling and in pain, and to know that more could be done was really what kind of brought me to a crossroads. And it was like I had to leave behind other entrepreneurial ventures and businesses I was a part of. I had to tell my business partners, my business mentor, I couldn't focus on anything else. It was like overwhelming my mind where I just couldn't think about anything but Piper and the community, and how there was so much more that needed to be done. And there was no other need in my own life that was more important than addressing those needs. And it was like, okay, well, I don't know what we're going to do, but I know there's more that can be done. I can see it. So I talked to my family, talked to some friends, and kind of cut ties with everything that had been my way of life, and then started, to dream again. It was like dreaming with a broken heart, right? Dreaming again, but with a new vision of what life was going to be like. Because as you know, I mean, life changes so dramatically with the diagnosis of a chronic illness in the family. I mean, your reality just, from what you thought it was, just changes. And that's where the crossing began and where the impetus for Piper's Angels was started.
And you really explain it so beautifully. I don't even know if you realize it, but your words are so descriptive and beautiful. And even what you have written on your website, which we have in the show notes, the link, it's just so beautiful. Like your truth just comes out. I think it's fair to say that usually more women are descriptive of emotion. And I love seeing it coming from you, because I think that other dads can really read it and hear your compassion and your emotion and say, you know what? This disease is a lot. And, you've probably nailed it for some of them who can't speak about it, maybe as emotionally and with so much love and hurt, that I've heard you talk about it. So I think that's a beautiful gift that you have. And I know every time I hear you speak, I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for reflecting that, Laura. You said truth, and I feel like that's just it. It's just that compassion and love and emotion. It just is so rooted in what the truth of our experience and reality is. And it's where our hearts are. And I mean, I feel like I don't know where I would be without cystic fibrosis or without Piper's diagnosis or, without LeeAnn. I mean, I don't know where I would be or what I'd be doing. I know I would not be as passionate and as compassionate and loving as I am, because those diagnoses, especially with Piper, I mean, it cracked me open. I mean, my heart just was torn open in ways I could never imagine. And I think you and I both relate to this on a deep level, with a lot of these families internationally, that, these kids are still struggling and suffering through so much pain and dying at a young age. And it's so challenging to process that and stay open, and vulnerable, but it's worth it. And it's worth looking at the truth of it, because that's what it is. One thing that I think CF and then the crossing has taught us and taught me is we use the tagline, bold in the face of fear. And to me, that's like really defines a lot of the path of CF. It's like constantly having to reinvest in facing it, facing the reality of facing the truth of it. And that's so hard. It's so hard to do.
Yeah.
So it's understandable, when people don't want to look at it. It's understandable, and that's okay.
I do want to focus on your event and everything, but I do want to mention the work that you and I and others are doing behind the scenes and working to help other parents and families in low-income countries and countries that don't have access to their needs. I just wanted to share with you real quick, and then I want to get back to your event. But I just talked to a mom in Egypt who's going to move here, but just Zooming with her a couple days ago, I really just wanted to sob. Like the challenges, the pain in her voice and the separation she's going to have because she's going to move to the U.S. and leave her husband behind because that's the only way they can make it work just to get care that her children need. It's heartbreaking. So the efforts that you and I are working on and thinking about and that everyone else is really important and needed, and they are a part of our community. So, I love that we're both working on that and thinking about it as well.
Yeah. And I feel that same sense of accountability. Here we are in this amazing country where we have the doctors, the resources, the medications, the therapies, and our children have the best shot at living their greatest life possible. And seeing that these other families, and it's not like the 1940s where they can't just go look on social media and see it happening. They can see it. They know what's happening, and so to know that your child could be getting the care and the medications and the therapies and the access to resources, but that they're not. I can't. I really. It's hard to imagine.
It is. It's like stepping back in time for them. They are starting anew. They are starting where the U.S. was, where we were when our people that were diagnosed with CF were dying as babies. So, yeah, we have a lot of work to do.
If you don't give them a voice, then who will? That's what I think about. That's our job in advocacy is to give the families a voice, to ask the questions other people aren't willing to ask, and to give them a voice. And, that's what people invest in you and I to do. That's what people, when they donate, to the Bunnell Foundation, to the Piper's Angels Foundation, when they, listen to you, when they are putting themselves into that work that we do, it's just so we can have a voice. So it's like we have to give these families a voice. It's the right thing to do. And the truth is, who else is going to do it? And that's the scary part, right? It's like, if we don't do it, who else is going to? And I know there's a lot of people who are looking to that vision of how we can now help these other families in other places, but it's going to take a unified effort for sure. The thing is, unlike the US, it's going to be a long, hard road. And I can only hope and pray and hold the vision that our CF community in the US and in these more fortunate countries will come together and see how we need to be giving as much back as, we've received.
Absolutely. And it's so complicated. There isn't one simple answer, as we've talked about, because this one mom just needs basic care so that should a modulator eventually be available for her children, they're healthy enough to receive it. So there are so many different aspects. So it's great that we're all learning about it so that we understand how to help them, not just do what we think they need, but give them what they're asking for. So we will continue to work on that. And I do want to get back to your event now because it is 2 weeks away and it is very exciting. And I know. And I finally get to meet you and Ayanna Sugarman in person. I cannot wait. How's your shoulder doing? And how is all the event going?
We're really excited. My shoulder's doing better. I had recently broken my arm. It just fractured the top part of the humerus and it's healed. It's just a little uncomfortable. I'm working every day on just a little bit better mobility. But, I'm paddling on a relay team this year with two of the original guys from 2013 and our good friend, Scott Johnson, who's had a double lung transplant with CF from North Carolina. He's coming down and paddling again. And so it's the four of us on a relay team. So Scott, Kyle Igneri, and Shane Pompa. And so, I'm only accountable to 20 miles in the open ocean. So, I put enough time in over the years where I can do that, even with an arm that's maybe not fully functional, but everybody just goes out there and gives it the best they can. That's all we can do. And by the time, we always tell people this, but by the time we show up in Bimini and we're having the community events there, and by the time we leave the beach, we're over 500,000 in fundraising. We've had a great success together. We've created an unbelievable amount of awareness, rallying, resources. So by the time we get there, the paddle home is just kind of the cherry on top, really. And hopefully we have good weather. You never know. It's the Gulf Stream. It's, the Bermuda Triangle. It's the summertime. And so it's the ocean. So it's the X factor. But planning is going really well. We're very fortunate. This is our 10-year celebration. We have an incredible team of our staff. So Ayanna Sugarman, our director of operations, Tatiana Timms, our development director, and Casey McCullough, who's our programs director. The four of us, we're the full-time staff for Piper's Angels in the Crossing. And we work on the Crossing 365 days of the year. It never turns off. We're already working on next year because registration opens August 1st. And I often ask myself, how long are we going to do this? This is just, it's like so overwhelming at times. But, as long as it's working, we're going to keep doing it. And if it's as simple as paddling and getting out there and doing it, and that's what's working, then we'll continue. And We've got a handful of cystic fibrosis paddlers this year coming in. So that's really exciting as well. I think in total we have 7, and that includes Piper and Mark Cotterell's coming from the UK, Stephen Walter, Riley Riakenna is coming in from Montana, Scott Johnson is coming back.
You have people from all over the world coming, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The event has grown. Oh, the other, Tyler Engel is our local CF paddler. Yeah, we have people coming in from over 15 states and a couple different places, around the world. So we have about 450 people going to Bimini, which is a pretty big group. It's the paddle event that has become the largest recreational boating event in the Bahamas.
Wow.
The Bahamas Ministry of Tourism really stepped up this year. They gave us a huge grand prize for our top fundraising team, which is actually right now the team in the lead is Team Ellie's Angel. So they're representing the CF family, and they are coming from Colorado.
How do they get in the lead? Is it about fundraising?
Yeah. So, each paddler has a minimum of $2,000 that they're required to raise. They've got a big team this year, and so they're rallying a bunch of people. If they win, if they're the top fundraising team, they will win a trip for 4, all expenses paid, on a luxury flight to the Bahamas, to the Eleuthera, at a really beautiful place to stay over there with excursions and everything. And that was all provided by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism and makers there. So just exciting to see the way the event grows and blossoms. And we have a lot of amazing core team. We call it the Bimini Dream Team. We got about 20 people, mostly volunteers, who are coming over to help us hands-on. We hire a little bit of help in Bimini while we're there from some of the locals. And then like the beach landing is like the grand finale. We had, I think, just over 150 volunteers there last year. So it's a big, big effort. I always apologize to the team and tell them, like, I am so sorry that I created the most complicated event in the world, because it's such a logistical madhouse. There's so many puzzle pieces to make it all work. The lodging, the boats, the coordination of the paddlers with which boats, all of it. And it all comes together in a beautiful way. And it's a very, very unique experience.
That is, and just learning some of the logistics that you've told us about has been really interesting. And then looking through all your magazines from years past and all those photos and all those people, you must be so overwhelmed with emotion on that day and throughout the whole thing. And when it's over, like, you did this, it happened. Like, you thought about it and you made this dream come true. That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. I feel it all day, all the time. People ask me, like, how you feeling? It's like, all I feel is gratitude. It's all I feel. All I feel is unconditional love and gratitude all the time. And no matter how busy we get, no matter how much pressure we have put on us, to get things done, late hours, early mornings, just weekend. From January to June, every weekend, there's training paddles and events, and, it's just nonstop. But to see the way it impacts the CF community is beyond anything I could have ever imagined. What we're able to do through Piper's Angels. And I always say the crossing community is what's built Piper's Angels Foundation into being an impactful grassroots organization. But the other thing that I really love about the crossing is witnessing people step into courage. And courage has become so important to me on this path with CF, because it's become very clear to me that adversity is the starting line for courage.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really get to, as a human, you don't really get to express your heart and your courage. The Latin root word of courage is cor, and it actually meant to speak or express through the heart, was the original meaning of courage. So to see people take on something that, a lot of these people are not tremendous athletes. Some of them are, but most of them are just your average everyday people who see this big challenge for a great cause, and they take it on. And it's intimidating to paddle out into the ocean in the middle of the night in the dark, and to put yourself in a situation where you're so small.
Mm-hmm.
When you're out there, out of sight of shore, out of sight of land, it's humbling, because you realize how, tiny you are in the grand scheme of things. And just that perspective and that expansive awareness is very humbling. So yeah, it is. It's really emotional. And that day, it's like going through the entire kaleidoscope and spectrum of emotions from the time you leave Bimini, your excitement and the intimidation and the fear of paddling out into the ocean in the dark and the anxiety and the stress around that and getting out there, and then, working with your team and everybody cheerleading for each other to get through it. And then, the pain starts to come, right? And it's like the pain turns on and it doesn't go away because you can't escape it. You're in the ocean. Even if you get in the boat, you're still in the ocean, in a boat. There's no escaping the heat, the salt, the struggle, the adversity, right? It just is so present the whole time, and you got to work through it. And it's a great symbol or example of, what people with CF go through their whole life. So it's just really powerful. And then at the beach landing, it's just the emotion there where everybody is so excited. Not only are they triumphant in what they accomplished that day, no matter how many miles they made it in the ocean, but then their friends and family are there cheering them on. And it's just really powerful.
That does. And you sort of answered my next question, which was going to be how other people feel that have participated in it. And I've seen, so many of the posts and the thoughts of people. It really seems very life-changing for people who just do this for the first time and then keep coming back.
Yeah, for sure. It always kind of catches me off guard when somebody says something like, man, this was a life-changing experience, but then it just grounds me right back in like, oh, they was that way for me. It has been every time. This will be my 7th time doing the crossing, and it's different, unique and beautiful and transformative and powerful each time.
So how many miles is it?
Well, we say it's 80 miles of love, right? 80 miles, but because of the curve a little bit, it's more like 82, 83 miles, Gotcha. But we leave those extra couple out, 80 is enough.
That is a lot. And, because I know I just couldn't do it. Like I said, we are volunteering, but I'm just so impressed with everybody that can do it. Of course, I'm probably the only one that would worry about sharks, but that does come to mind. Like, is there a concern by anybody?
I think that's the number one question. What about the sharks, right? So the wildlife in the ocean is the least of my concerns. There's a lot more to be concerned about from a safety perspective, and safety is our number one priority. We have a massive safety team. Our director of safety, Josh Ferris, in terms of the logistics and keeping everybody safe, the boaters, the captains, each paddler has a Garmin satellite tracker on them. We have 7 safety support boats in the event. Every boat has a paramedic on them who is equipped to handle emergency situations. The Coast Guard is notified of our float plan. We do everything. Paddling is inherently slow and safe. So it's more so, somebody slipping and falling on a dock in Bimini, right? Them being out snorkeling the day before and, being around the boat and the propeller, right? Heat exhaustion, dehydration can be an issue. Carbon monoxide poisoning, paddling behind boat.
Okay.
You have to be careful of where you're paddling and what, the air you're breathing. Those are all big concerns. Freighters in the middle of the night coming through the shipping lanes of the Gulf Stream, big freighters who can't turn.
Wow.
So you're going one way and they're going the other, and you're crossing their path perpendicularly. And so staying out of their way is a big one. Just people being safe, staying with the boat. And those are really the concerns that we have and we addressed. We have seen sharks in Bimini. Most of the sharks that have ever been seen during the actual crossing were close to Florida. Within a half a mile of the beaches in Florida, because that's where most of the sharks are feeding on that shelf in 100 to 300 feet of water. But there's no doubt that no matter what, when you're paddling in the darkness in the ocean at night, you have a lot of starlight and moonlight typically. But, if you fall off your board and you hit that black water, you'll see people get on their board faster than you've ever seen them get on their board ever. They hit the water and they're back on their board. It's like, wow, how did they do that? But, anything could happen. It's the Gulf Stream, it's the ocean. There's inherent risks to all of it. All we can do is prepare as best possible to be safe.
And you are. What a huge effort you have. It sounds fantastic. And so many things are happening, so many people you're uplifting, and it's going to be a fantastic event. I wanted to talk about briefly before we end, you do have programs and you are helping people, after you have this huge fundraiser. So if people are looking for help, tell us what kinds of things you do to help them.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it's taken us 7 years to really build out a lot of the programs that we kind of set out to create, the application process and, really refining how we look at the social determinants of health, all the aspects of a CF family or person's life that, is maybe outside of the scope of the hospital and the medications and those therapies. The first program we launched was called Forever Stoked Scholarships. And that was just based on the inspiration of the ocean being a therapy and healing mechanism for people with CF. So we offer scholarships for people with CF to participate in saltwater activities. That can cover camps, coaching, equipment, gear, and participation in the crossing.
Wow.
So we often will offer a partial scholarship to people with CF if they do want to participate in the crossing, just because it's such an empowering journey for them. And it gives them a reason to train, to get out, to be healthy, to get on the water, whether it's the ocean or not. A lot of people are training on lakes and rivers. So we also offer urgent financial assistance. So our UFA grants are available to anyone with CF who has a medically related need verified by their social worker. So they fill out the application. The purpose of it is urgent financial assistance. So it's to try to get them, hey, that family is struggling to maybe make rent because they were out of work for 2 weeks because of a hospitalization. Let's get them caught up. Let's help get that car taken care of so they can drive back and forth to the hospital. If they need equipment, any kind of medication that's not covered by insurance, anything that's a medically related need, we have those grants available. And we do occasionally offer grants for financial assistance for transplant. Those are further and few between just because those are larger grants, typically around $5,000. Most of our urgent financial assistance grants run between $300 to $500 and sometimes up to $1,000, depending on the case and scenario. We created an unmasking mindfulness program to focus on mental health in the CF community. So we have an 8-week online meditation course that teaches people with CF and their caregivers how to meditate with mindfulness and to have that tool so they can use it anytime, anywhere. And we've had great success with that program. So we created a similar program that uses the same format, and we're launching it soon, called the Inspire Breathworks program. And that's a breath coaching program, also an 8-week online meditation course. Really, really proud of the curriculum developed for that. Both of those, the Unmasking Mindfulness and Inspire Breathworks, were selected to be presented at the National Cystic Fibrosis Conference in Phoenix this year. And we're really proud and excited for that. And the Inspire Breathworks course did receive a grant recently to help to get that program off the ground. And, one of the things that we track and we've formalized over the years in terms of what we do, and I'm sure you understand this, is peer-to-peer support, right? The psychosocial component of when a family has a new diagnosis or when they're going through something. So we track the time that we ourselves and or our network of mentors is basically providing as peer-to-peer support for the CF community. So we worked at refining that and tracking that. So it's a tangible metric that we are aware of. And, that's become, I think, one of our bigger roles in terms of advocacy and awareness. And it's just peer-to-peer support. That's a big one. And then there's kind of some offshoot things that we'll do every once in a while in terms of almost like a make-a-wish scenario where, somebody with CF will have something going on and we'll go to kind of more extraordinary measures to try to make something happen for them. Those are our angel wishes. And then we do care pack based on kind of a one-on-one basis, for people when they're going through a tough time. We'll work with the family on putting together a really unique, customized care pack that just supports them in getting through that time and feeling good. And those are the primary programs and services that we have.
Well, it's wonderful. And that's a lot. And I have to tell you, I will be sending people your way for rent, mortgage, cars, I would say that there's a huge need for it. And my foundation does financial assistance and lung transplant grants and college scholarships and some other things. But one thing we do not do is the rent and the car stuff. But we do get a lot of requests for that. So that is going to be something that we can send people your way for, because there is definitely a big need for that. And unfortunately, we have to wrap this up. We could go on for hours.
For days.
I know. You have an event coming up, so you've got to get back to work. But anything else that you want to say as we wrap up, either about the future of CF or the direction you're going? Anything that you would like to end with?
Yeah. First of all, just thank you, Laura, and to the Bonnell Foundation, your board of directors, and everybody who supports you and what you do, because I think one of the biggest takeaways from being in a grassroots organization is that, for me, a small grassroots organization can have a huge impact when you're talking about a rare disease. I think what our grassroots organizations do in this country and beyond for the CF community is so vital and so important. And I only see that becoming more important as time goes on. And, as much as some of these new modulator therapies and some of these new therapies in general are really helping make a huge difference. My sister LeeAnn was recently taken off some of those medications because of the side effects. Mm-hmm. And so, I just want to share that, the reality is that, there is not a one-stop shop, one-fix solution for the CF community. And we've got some great things that are in the works, in the pipeline for everybody. But it's important that we take a closer examined look at what people are going through, look at those needs, and not just kind of dust our hands off and say, oh, the work is done. Because the more that I see, the more I realize there's a lot more work to do. And the only people who are going to do it are the people who care. My friend Ricky Aiken says, those who need it, lead it. And that's what we're doing. And I'm so thankful to you, Laura, for, everything, and for committing to come down to be there at the beach landing. I can't wait to see you there. I'll be sweaty and salty, but I'll give you a big hug if that's okay.
Yes, that'll be great. I'm sure I'm going to be sweaty too. It's going to be 90 degrees or something crazy?
It will be hot. It'll be very hot. Yeah. So shade, hydration, very important. But yeah, just I'm so proud of the cystic fibrosis community as a whole, and how far everybody's come into, I'm so grateful to every mom and dad, every family, everybody with CF over the decades. And I even think about it over the hundreds of years, thousands of years, before they ever knew what CF was. So all those moms and dads who lost their children at infancy and because of failure to thrive, right, and they never knew why, and it's like, I think about thousands and thousands of people with CF, right? And so it's just amazing to be alive at this time and to be able to do this work.
It is. And the CF community is so lucky to have you as well. I mean, I could go on and praise so many more things about you, but we have run out of time, sadly. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you, and can't wait for that hug in just a couple of weeks. So thank you, Travis.
Yes, thank you.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.